Good morning from Brazil, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar, Railway Projects in Brazil via Portugal. My name is Christoph Robertson. I'm head of Advantage Austria in Rio de Janeiro. And together with my colleague, João Gomes, I will host this webinar here today. You might be a bit surprised that you can actually not see me today. We're unfortunately having a technical problem with the software, with the GoToWebinar software that GoToWebinar did not manage to solve. And for this reason, you will unfortunately not see us speakers, but you'll only hear us. The idea of this webinar was to show you Austrian companies what are the new investments here in Brazil. So here in Brazil, in the railway sector, many new investments have started. Some investments due to new concessions, other new projects, and now also a new project from the Brazilian government, Portugiesische, and we'll talk about that today. Some of you might ask yourself, so what does Portugal have to do with that? I brought you here, it's a map, a world map, where you can see where Portugal has been all over the world over the last centuries, and you see here very big in South America, Brazil. So it is obviously not a coincidence that here in Brazil we speak Portuguese and not Spanish like in the rest of Latin America. So because of that, there's obviously still a very strong connection between Portugal and Brazil. So my colleague João and me, we thought, what do we bring to you with this connection, Brazil and Portugal? Let's bring a new project and a new concession to present that to you. And from the Portuguese side, a general contractor. They're very strong here in Brazil, so that was the idea behind this webinar. The original plan you see here, that was the original program. Unfortunately, we had a last-minute cancel from Bahn. So unfortunately, they will not be able to be here with us today. They had to, so Felipe Heidrich and Gustavo Cota, who were supposed to be our speakers today, they had to travel to their mine. Bahn is a Brazilian mining company, and they and their teams had to travel last minute to their mine. Unfortunately, cannot be here today. The good news I bring you is we will do another webinar with Bahn, so they agreed on doing that in some weeks. It is now planned for November 4th, where then they will present their project, Fuel 1, which is their railway project, a bit more than 500 kilometers in the state of Bahia. And then they will tell you how to do business with them, and will be available at the end, as always, for your questions. So please save the date for this second webinar. That's how the program is going to be, so we had to change a bit. After my intro, we'll start with Markus Hoskowitz from ÖKB. He will tell you about the possibility of financing your projects here in Brazil. I will talk a bit about railway projects, so that's, we put this new into the program. So instead of Bahn telling you about their project, today I will tell you a bit about several projects that are ongoing and also will happen in the future. Then I'll pass on to João Gomes, my colleague in Lisbon. He'll talk about the Hub Portugal, how he and the office in Lisbon can support you. Then we'll move on to Gilberto Costa from SOMAFEL. He will tell you how you can do business with them. And at the end, as always with our webinars, we're all available for your questions. So let's get started with the first presentation. I'd like to ask Markus Hoskowitz to turn on his microphone so we see if we can hear him.
Hello.
Perfect. Markus, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here today with us.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Christoph, for the invitation and the warm welcome. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to present to you how ÖKB can support you as Austrian exporter today from a slightly different angle, and also how ÖKB can support you as a Portuguese construction company. And I'm quite happy that financing is the first presentation because it has a kind of symbolism. You have to talk about financing at a very early stage. The chances of winning a contract will be higher if you offer a package solution, your product plus long-term financing. And in order to create this package solution, you need to talk at an early stage to a financing bank, to OEKB, and most important, talk to your customer about financing. Use financing as an add-on that makes your product even more attractive. Now, normally we talk about direct exports, during direct exports, refinancing direct exports. Today we're going to talk about indirect exports, which are quite an interesting topic because we in Austria do not have so many large construction companies that are active around the world. The supply chains are getting increasingly globalized, and indirect exports are also a chance for Austrian SMEs to participate in international projects. And there is definitely a potential for Austrian companies for entering a market as a sub-supplier of a Portuguese EPC contractor who covers markets and project sizes that would normally be out of reach for the Austrian company alone. Now, I cannot see who is online, but I suppose that some of our listeners are very well informed about OEKB's products, whereas others are not quite so familiar with us yet. So let me just briefly introduce OEKB and what we do. Last year we had about 3,500 customers. We're about 115 people working in our export services, but we also have other lines of business. We offer capital market services, we do energy clearing, development financing, and we even offer credit facilities to Austrian tourism companies. We had quite a successful year, 2020, with about 7.5 billion euros of guarantees issued. Now, how can we support you? On the one hand, there are the export transactions. We cover your risk of non-payment, political risk, economic risk, and we offer solutions for the basic problem that the Austrian exporter would like to receive the money right away, whereas his international client prefers to pay over a longer period of time. And there is a variety of solutions, but we have a solution for small project sizes, for larger projects, and for various types of projects. So it's just essential that you talk to your bank and you talk to us at an early stage. And we also do a lot in terms of investment financing for foreign investment of Austrian companies, also domestic investments of Austrian companies as long as they are export related. And we also have working capital loans. And for many of our products, there is a bonus if your product is a green one. Now, Brazil last year was #2 in our ranking of new transactions. Of course, this changes from year to year depending on where the big projects happen, but Brazil is normally among the top 5, so it is really an important market for us. And within our Brazilian projects, if you look at the last 5 years, 36% were in the field of transport. So the Brazilian transport, especially railway sector, is actually a very important market for us. Last year, we issued 185 billion euros guarantees, and our total exposure was 375 million in Brazil. We are very willing and able to cover Brazilian corporate risk, and there's also quite a number of acceptable Brazilian banks with a very good rating. Now, this is one example of what role OEKB can play in an indirect export situation. It's a supplier's credit. There is an Austrian supplier who has an export contract with a Portuguese EPC contractor, who in turn has an export contract with a Brazilian client. And normally OEKB covers the risk of non-payment by the Portuguese company in favor of the Austrian exporter. But it can also be that the Austrian exporter has an if and when clause in his contract, so he only will receive the money from his Portuguese EPC contractor if the Brazilian end user pays. So in fact, the Austrian company in this case does not have a Portuguese risk, but a Brazilian risk, and we could cover this risk in such a situation. And we could also offer non-payment risk cover to the Portuguese EPC contractor because there is Austrian content. So we can really play a role in the coverage of non-payment risk in an indirect export situation. The insurance premium for short-term insurance starts from 1.7% per year, and the cover ratios, as you can see, are quite high. Now, the next example is actually the main event of my presentation. It's a buyer's credit with risk sharing. If it is a large project, there will be a financing bank. And, as it is a Portuguese EPC contractor, the credit contract will probably be insured by the Portuguese ECA. And as there is a portion of Austrian content from the sub-supplier, we as OEKB can share the risk with COSEC and offer refinancing to the bank. Refinancing for the Austrian portion or even for the whole project. So the clear message to the Austrian exporters is make your Portuguese EPC contractor aware that he can obtain from Austria not only your high quality goods and services, but in addition, OEKB can play an important role in the financing. And our message to the Portuguese EPC contractor is buy from Austrian companies, make use of our export financing scheme, and present to your Brazilian client a package solution, including long-term financing up to 40 years, plus construction period. Here are a few improvements in our export financing scheme from this year. I just want to highlight that we are willing and able to do large and long-term projects, and if your project is a sustainable one, then we will have even more flexibility in terms of sourcing. Now, this is the end of my presentation about financing, but I hope it is the beginning of a fruitful cooperation between Austrian and Portuguese companies on the Brazilian market. So thank you very much, and back to you, Christoph.
Thank you, Marcus, for this presentation. And if you have any questions already, for example, from Marcus Hoskowitz, KB, you can already ask those now at any time of the webinar, actually. So just write your question in the chat that you find on the right side, preferably in English, and we'll answer those questions then at the end of the webinar. I will now give you a presentation on the railway projects here in Brazil. Let's start with the map of Brazil. You see here the Brazilian railway network. It also includes projects. According to the Ministry of Infrastructure, it's almost 30,000 kilometers, but only about 25% of that is actually in permanent use. When it comes to passenger transport, non-urban passenger transport is a very small part of transport here in Brazil. So you have few trains, for example, Vale here, an example, that transport passengers outside of cities. but mostly passenger transport is urban in the bigger cities like São Paulo, Rio, where you have a subway, also train system, and some other major cities around Brazil. You have here divided the companies between public and private companies. It's about 1,100 kilometers of rail system, 11 million passengers a day, and it's 15 operators operating those lines. When it comes to freight transport, you also have divided between private and public companies, but here the private companies that have concessions, they dominate the market in this segment. The concessions happened in the 1990s. It's 30 years concessions, and last year the first early renewals of those concessions happened with Rumo and Vale. Here you see a map of some major railway projects happening here in Brazil. One project that is quite new from the Brazilian government is called Trilhos. This project is different from what was done before. So in the past and still ongoing is there are concessions. So private companies bid for concessions like Vale, Rumo, and so on, and then operate it for 30 years. In this case, this new project is different. The idea is to, parallel to the concessions, also offer the possibility and give companies the opportunity to hand in projects that they're interested in, and that will then be analyzed by the government. And so far there have been 14 requests with more than 5,000 kilometers of rail, with an expected investment of around 85 billion Brazilian reais. Those are the early renewals that I already mentioned for another 30 years. So last year there was Rumo Malha Paulista and the two lines from Vale that were already renewed early. You see here also the numbers of the expected investments, and more renewals of concessions are to come and are expected for next year. I'll talk about some projects that we have here in Brazil. Ferrovia Norte-Sul. It's a long one for 4 states by Rumo Logística. Was signed about 2 years ago, also with a 30-year concession. Fuel 1 from Bahn. So that's a project that will be presented more in detail than in some weeks, together with Bahn, as I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar. For those of you who came a bit late, unfortunately, Bahn had to cancel the participation today last minute, since they had to travel to their mine in Bahia and could not make it to participate today. The contract was signed just recently, as you see at the beginning of the month. It has a concession of 35 years. FICO is by Vale. So this was part of the deal of the early renewal of Vale as a counterpart. So they will build this railway, and this also just happened recently, 10 days ago, the official start of construction. Ferrovia Transnorte China is actually a public-private partnership between CSN and Valec. A part of it already completed, and here works have been going on, stopped. So this is a long-going project. Also new is Primeira Ferrovia Estadual de Mato Grosso. So here Rumo got this project in the state of Mato Grosso, and the construction is expected to start next year. A planned project were The signing of the contract of a small part of it with Vale is also expected soon, probably next month. Is a Ferrovia Rio de Janeiro Espírito Santo, so a railway connecting those two states with the ports here in Rio, in Vitória, and also in between the new mega project, the port project Açu here in the state of Rio. Ferrovião is quite a famous project. It's a project of more than 900 kilometers, and it's supposed to bring grains to export. You see here, so the railway line would go up north and then connect it to the river, where it then will be exported. So here there's still no date for the public auction of this concession. In São Paulo, which is the by far largest subway and commuter rail system, here's some projects that are going on and some investments. You will all get the PowerPoint slides, so if you're interested to have a look at this later. Another project in São Paulo is the Trem Intercidades. It's a commuter rail project between the cities of São Paulo and Campinas, about 100 kilometers long. And here, the public auction is expected for next year, for April. And it's also a major project coming up. How can we support you? You see here a couple of bullet points, what we do for you Austrian companies. If you need anything here in Brazil, if you're interested in doing business here and you're not yet here, just contact us. Let's set up a video call to talk about that and see how we can best support you. One part of our job is to organize events, just like the webinar today, or also all sorts of other events, online, offline, recently mostly online, unfortunately. But now an event that's coming up in Austria is the Austrian Railway Forum. So that's going to be in December. And there you have the opportunity to get to know several markets. We'll have several presentations. I will also do one about Brazil, where I will talk more about the market here and go more into detail. Here in Brazil, I'd like to invite you to participate in our Austria Showcase that we're organizing now in November. This is a virtual event, 100% online. You can present your company, your products, your services to the Brazilian market. Our colleagues did a similar event in May in Chile, Colombia, and Peru. And now we'll do this event here in Brazil, so you're all invited to participate. You can still register until October 15th. And if you have any questions, just let me know, just contact me, and I'll let you know more details. Now I'd like to pass on to my colleague João Gomes in Lisbon. João?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. We can hear you. Unfortunately, we cannot see you, as we all know, but the floor is yours, João. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Christoph. Herzlich willkommen in Portugal. Bem-vindos. Warum über Portugal nach Brasilien gehen? Portugiesische Generalunternehmen, EPCs, sind dort gut etabliert und haben Milliardenprojekte im Portfolio. Es gibt auf dem Bahnbereich spezialisierte EPC-Tochter, die an Kooperation mit österreichischen Unternehmen interessiert sind, wie das Unternehmen SOMAFEL, dessen Regionaldirektor Gilberto Costa der nächste Speaker ist. Und die Entscheidungen über Einkauf fallen zentral in Portugal, nur 3,5 Flugstunden vom Österreich entfernt. Mein Name ist João Gomes. Ich bin Ihr Ansprechpartner am Außenwirtschaftscenter Lissabon von dem Bahnbereich und Drittstaatenkooperation. So I will now switch to English. Before passing the floor to SOMAFEL, our Portuguese keynote speaker, Gilberto Costa, I want to make two remarks. One, what are the keys to business success in Portugal and with Portuguese partners in Africa and Latin America? You have to take it really serious. Invest time, be present. It's about long-term partnership, not a one-off email. So I am here to assist you. And two, these are our upcoming activities, so events regarding the rail sector. So you are mostly welcome to join. Please feel free to contact me anytime for more information regarding these topics. So now I want to present our Portuguese keynote speaker. So live from Brazil, Gilberto Costa, Regional Director of SOMAFEL in Brazil, has a long track record of professional experience, not only in Brazil, but also in Portugal and Africa. The company SOMAFEL is operating in Brazil since 2009. So you will see the important references SOMAFEL already has on this market. So Gilberto, welcome to this webinar. Please let us know more about your company, so your projects on the Brazilian market. The floor is yours, Gilberto.
Thank you, João. Thank you for your introduction and, of course, for the invitation. Good morning, good afternoon to all. Bom dia, boa tarde. So my name is Roberto Costa. Like João said, I'm the country manager of SOMAFEL in Brazil. I'm very glad to be here today. I will show you a quick presentation of SOMAFEL responding to the invitation made by Advantage Austria, for which we are very grateful. SOMAFEL was founded in 1956 as a family company that in the following years and decades became the leading railway service supplier in Portugal. Since 1992, SOMAFEL became part of the Milliardeninvestitionen Group, one of the leading companies in the construction field in Portugal, with over 1,000 million euros of turnover and 10,000 workers spread along 22 countries in 4 continents. SOMAFEL has its quality, environment, health and safety and innovation system certified, as well as risk system certified for the infrastructure manager network rail and transport for London. So let me tell you about a bit about our strategy. Like João said, normally is a long-term partnerships with clients and other companies. So first of all, we are based in value our people and our history, because we think that people are the most important assets in a company. Second, we challenge the status quo. Our status quo is in our DNA to follow new challenges, new projects in new places. We believe that for achieving success, we need to go out of our comfort zone. Of course, we have to do that practicing a sustainable approach to projects, to study very well the places that we do the projects, the conditions, because if we sign a contract, we have to do the contract the best way possible. After that, we are always internationally focused, because we come from a small country, but that has the need and the appetite always to look outside his borders and look for new challenges. And finally, the commitment to our clients. Of course, that's a very important part of any company. Like João said, we don't believe in short-term contracts or partnerships. We believe that clients are forever and not only for one contract. So let me talk about some of our strengths. Hope that you can hear me good. Since the 60s, we started our internationalization, and today we are present in 9 countries in 3 different continents. For that, we had very soon the need to adapt ourselves to different realities. So now we have the capacity to work in 4 different gauges with high-value solutions and accumulated technical expertise. Of course, as a Portuguese company, SOMAFEL has a good and natural entrance in Portuguese-speaking countries, as is the case of Brazil. So we are established in Brazil since 2009 as a legal Brazilian company. We already performed works in the main railway roads in the country. Some of these railway roads Christopher talked before, FIOL, FC, and FNS, and also in important urban railway transport systems like Rio de Janeiro tramway, Metro of Salvador, and Metro Brazil. Now SOMAFEL has like some 500 workers, and the railway park equipment suited to local market requirements, which included damping machines, ballast regulators, mobile flashback, welding machines, and railroads. Our main clients are big railway private operators such as Vale, Rumo, and CCR, and also public transportation companies like Metro Brazil. Here in this map, you can see that we already, some places that we already had experience in the north of Brazil, central Brazil, also in the south of Brazil, as well as coast cities and in the interior side. So now let me talk about some of our strengths in Brazil. As we already said, Brazil is a Portuguese-speaking country, so that's a benefit for us. We have a good knowledge of Brazilian culture and people. Also, we have a good knowledge of the complex and vast Brazilian legislation, namely labor, tax, and environmental laws. As we saw in the previous map, we gained a good knowledge of the country in different states, in different and varied regions, from the large and modern cities to more isolated areas of the interior. SOMAFEL works in Brazil as a legal Brazilian company, not a branch. So we have the advantage to be registered in the technical and commercial associations, which is mandatory for most of the cases. And of course, we have a branch here, but we use our Brazilian company to do our works. The thing that I'm most proud here in Brazil, for the last 10 years, we gained a multidisciplinary and very loyal Brazilian technical staff with engineers, technicians, operators, lawyers that help us in the last years implement our company in the country. And finally, as a part of the Teixeira Group, we take advantage because the group is solidly present in Brazil for the last 15 years. Today we have around 4,000 employees, and we have clients in different market segments, such as Vale, CCR, Bahn, AngloGold, Vanchi, Aena, Sonai, and others. So very quickly, I will tell you about some works that we did in Brazil. I don't have time to show you everything, but I chose 4. First, I chose FIOL because we already talked about this project that Bahn now won one part of the concession. We worked there and in Tangaçu, in the state of Bahia. and construct 116 kilometers track in that place. After that, we also participate in the duplication of FC. Is the carriage railway is one of the biggest cargo railways in the world, and it's run by Vale. We work directly to Vale and with the construction of 170 kilometers track. I also want to talk about two projects that we participate in urban trains. First, the Rio de Janeiro tramway. It's an iconic new tramway in downtown Rio de Janeiro, with the construction of 28 kilometers of railway slab track using the top-down system. And finally, the line 2 of Metro of Salvador, also in the state of Bahia, with the construction of almost 40 kilometers of railway slab track, also by top-down system. So finally, Christopher already explained me, show various projects in Brazil. There are several and dozens of opportunities and projects, railway projects here in Brazil. I chose these 4 because, of course, the Bahn project with the batch 1 of FIOL that today we already talked about it. Ferroground, that will be a huge greenfield project in north of Brazil. The Trem da Cidade that Christopher already talked in the Great São Paulo. It will be a Great São Paulo urban train, and also the recently announced Fato that Rumo will construct in Mato Grosso. That probably will be one of the first totally private railway lines in Brazil. But like I said, there are other several projects and opportunities here in Brazil. So now it's all. Thank you very much for listening, for the attention. I think that my contacts will be shown with the organization. And vielen Dank. I don't know if I pronounced correctly. And muito obrigado. And now I will hand over to Christopher.
Thank you very much, Gilberto, for your presentation. I'd like to go on now to our questions and answers. I already see some questions that I have received here. I'd like to invite all of you still, if you have any questions, to ask them now. We have a bit more than 10 minutes for those questions, especially, of course, for Gilberto from SOMAFEL, who's here today with us, because with me and João Gomes in Lisbon, you can always talk, of course, you can always call us, send us an email if you have any questions, but with our speakers, it's definitely easier today live. So let's get started here with the first question. I'll ask first all speakers to turn on their microphones. Gilberto, a question for you. Do you bring the small track maintenance machines from Portugal to Brazil, or are you also buying locally?
No, for the railway equipments, we mainly import it from Portugal. Not yet bought any locally. We locally only bought the support equipment, like civil works equipment that we need also to do our works. But the railway equipment we import from Portugal.
Okay, perfect.
But anyway, that's a possibility to do some business of buying here locally, but until now we didn't have that need.
Okay, great. Next question is for ÖKB. Markus, what is the required Austrian content for being able to refinance the whole contract value through ÖKB backing?
Well, it always depends on the specialities of the individual case. Normally, you require we require 50% for insurance cover, but there are several exceptions. And as I mentioned before, for example, if it's a green project, less Austrian content is required. Now, if we're talking about refinancing, this is something we have to talk to our ministry in advance, because it's not a standard procedure to finance the whole project. But the more Austrian content you have, the better the chances are. And as I also mentioned before, we are very willing and able to do large transactions. So I would advise the person who is asking to send us a rough estimate of the sourcing, what comes from which country, and then we will be glad to give you an indication of how much is possible in terms of insurance and how much is possible in terms of refinancing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Another question for you. Would ÖKB also do the fronting of the full transaction? If so, how much Austrian content is necessary?
Yes, we gladly do the fronting in the transaction. But again, how much content is necessary depends on the specifications of the individual case, and this is something we would also have to discuss with our risk-sharing partners. So it really, the story always starts with a rough estimate of the sourcing, and then we can do our due diligence and we can talk to our risk-sharing partners. That's the best way to proceed, to give us a rough estimate of the sourcing at a very early stage.
Okay, thank you. Are EPC contracts already in place for the projects you presented? The business case for Austrian suppliers would be to deliver equipment to the EPC contractor that won the project. So I presented several projects here. Some already, of course, have EPC contracts. Other projects that are still in earlier phases don't, so it really depends on the project. I think Gilberto will be also, you will probably be the right person to also answer this question since you are an EPC company and you know the market better than anyone.
Excuse me, but I didn't understand the question.
The question was the business case for Austrian suppliers would be to deliver equipment to the EPC contractor that won the project. So how can Austrian companies do business?
I think that, of course, the part of the supply of equipment is important. It's important to say that most of the big private operators that have concessions here in Brazil, they also buy their equipment for, like Vale and MRES, for instance. But there's opportunities in the equipment, of course, also with the EPC contractor, but also with the railway equipment, okay, materials, sorry, because the supply of technical technical solutions, new railway materials, will be important, because in Brazil, some clients and some private operators, they are looking for new solutions, not only the conventional solutions. So I think it's important for, if I was an Austrian company, to be aware of this, and with some bridges that we can provide, companies like us, or even you with your assistant, can make that bridge to reach the client.
Okay, perfect. So from my point of view, it really depends on what you want to sell, of course.
Of course.
If it's a product, a service that is for the construction of the line itself, or then for the operator, which would be Bali, which would be Ulmo, which would be MRS, who buy a lot of equipment, obviously.
Because also depends the type of project that the client wants to do. No? Sometimes it's not being that usually in Brazil, but I think others will do EPC contracts. But sometimes what the operators do is to buy the materials, buy the equipment, and only contract the construction, something like that. It depends on the project.
Perfect. Let's move on to the next question. Also for you, Gilberto, are you considering, well, the question came in Portuguese, so I hope I'm translating it right. Are you also considering milling the rails?
Sorry?
Are you considering milling? I think it's milling, fredamento. Estão considerando o fredamento de trilhos também?
The grinding of the it's not common in Brazil to do the grinding, but of course we are considered, if it's a requirement of the project, of course we will have to do that. We have grinding machines in Portugal. We don't have it here in Brazil because until now we didn't have that need. Projects didn't require that. There were some possibilities to do that kind of work in some places like Brasilia, but at the end they didn't come out for now. But if it's required, of course we are open to that.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is, are passenger trains being built in Brazil or imported? I'll answer that. So there are passenger trains being built here in Brazil, but there's also a lot being imported, mostly from Asia. There is I believe it's Alstom that won a big project. In this case, actually, they're building trains here in Brazil for export. So both is possible here. Then there's some more specific questions that I'll get in touch with you that I see here. Are there any plans for electrification of lines? So as far as I know, no. The electrification that I know here in Brazil is in urban passenger transport. Gilberto, maybe you can say something about that.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Only in public transport, mainly in metro. But I think that with the preoccupations with the reduction of carbon emissions, I think in the medium long term, I know that there are already some operators that are planning to switch to electrical energy, but not in a short period. So
one project I know from Vale is that they have an electric locomotive, but it's in this case it's not the whole system that they will change. Just one project.
Vale has that opportunity that the locomotive, electric locomotive, but they are also studying in some places to implement electrical catenary. But like I said, it's green. The studies are green for now.
Exactly. There are some more questions. I just had a look at the time. We already passed our time actually. So Gilberto, if you don't mind, I'll pass on a couple of more questions to you, written by email after our webinar. And
okay.
Also I'll answer the rest of the questions that are for me here. So if you also have, you participants, any more questions than that you wrote to me now, feel free to send us an email, and we'll answer you then by email. I would just like to show you very quickly events that are coming up. You can have a look at that then when you download the PowerPoint. Here in Brazil, our events, the virtual Austria Showcase that is happening in November, the Railway Forum in Vienna, Rail Life in Madrid just before that, and then the big NT Expo that is planned for next year in São Paulo. And I'd like to thank you for all your participation, and I hope to see many Austrian companies participating in our Austria Showcase here in Brazil in November. Here are the contact details of my colleague in Vienna, who's responsible for the railway sector, entire mobility sector actually. João Gomes, my colleague in Lisbon, and myself here in Rio de Janeiro. Thank you for being here with us today, and hope to see you all. You'll receive an email with the invitation for the webinar with Bamin. Also, once again, my apologies for them not being here today. It was last minute, and of course, there was not much we could do. Thank you, and have a nice afternoon here from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Thank you, Marcos, Gilberto, João.
See you. Thank you very much for your presentation, Christoph.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.